So hi everyone, I'm Chris Kelly, founder and CEO of Survata. Thank you very, very much for joining us tonight, especially in the midst of these scary coronavirus times. We know a lot is on your mind, so we do appreciate you joining us tonight. And we of course hope the number one priority of everyone is the health and safety of their friends and family, so we know that's on your mind. And we are happy to be working with many of you in the room. So many of you know who we are, but I know some of you are newcomers to Survata. So to give you a quick sense of who we are as the sponsor for tonight. So we are the brand intelligence platform, which means we have software and data that is used by the world's leading brands, agencies, and publishers to plan, measure, and optimize brand marketing. And this is our 5th or 6th meetup of this type. And we do this for a couple reasons. One, of course, is knowledge. Our knowledge is standing over there, about to take the stage. And we have decades of experience in ad measurement and marketing analytics, about to drop knowledge on us tonight. And of course, the topic on everyone's mind this year seems to be advanced TV, convergent TV, connected TV. However you categorize it, everyone's talking about it, whether it's in private conversations with CMOs or the headlines in every marketing tech blog. We know that's on everyone's mind, so we gathered a very talented crew of people in the broader advanced TV and convergent TV and connected TV space, so we're very excited for that. And of course, another part of this is networking. So even though we are not shaking each other's hands tonight, we know it's still helpful to meet new faces and build everyone's personal and professional network. It's a small ad measurement and marketing analytics world, so great to build our networks and support each other. But I know why you're here is not to hear me speak, but to hear from our talented moderator and panelists. So first, big thanks to Amy Casale from Roku, a manager of ad research at Roku, who's moderating tonight's panel. And maybe with some cocktails, it'll get a little spicy on the panel. So Amy's going to keep everyone in line, and maybe she said she might stir the pot. So we'll see if we get some real truth out of people. And a big thanks to our 6 panelists. So we have Devin Fallon, VP of Media Insights and Analytics at Tremor. Jessica Hogue, GM of Measurement and Analytics at Innovid. Bob Ivins, Chief Data Officer at Ampersand. Heidi Miller, VP and Head of Analytics at Mediahub. It's a contest. That's the best cheer so far. Heidi brought her crew. And George Musi, EVP and Global Head of Marketing Sciences at Publicis. And my colleague, Ken Archer, VP of Product at Survata. Good Survata turnout, I like that. Why don't you guys take a seat and I will turn things over to Amy.
Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for the great introduction and thank you guys for being here too. And thank you again to the panel. I'm excited for hear you guys have to say and maybe stir the pot, but I'll try and keep it relatively mild. So we can start things off jump right into it. What are you guys seeing as marketers' biggest pain points when it comes to advanced TV measurement? And to that point also, what is on their wish list? And if you want to also qualify what you're referring to with advanced TV, I know that can take a couple different shapes, forms, definitions. Feel free to do so as well. Devin, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. If I can get my mic up here. I'm just desperately trying not to be the first person to cough up here. But from our perspective, because we work with a pretty large number of publishers and platforms, there's always been a challenge for us of the degree of data and the consistency of data that we get from one partner to the next. I think that's something that's I imagine a commonly held issue across a bunch of these guys. I know some of them probably have some solutions to that, but I think because of that, we've really had to and found a great opportunity by leaning into the type of measurement we can get with partners like Survata and others all the way throughout the funnel. But back to your original question, I think that consistency of data has really been a big challenge for a lot of folks.
Yeah, absolutely. What are you seeing, Bob?
I think it's I don't get the same problem. I think consistency of data is one of the things, but I mean, TV's transforming itself in real time, and I think trying to keep pace with that and recognizing that it's TV is completely evolving, the legacy distribution systems are evolving, the measurement systems are evolving. I think that it's trying to stay ahead of that. I also think that TV recognizes that they need to kind of neutralize the advantages that digital has had in data targeting and measurement for the last 20 years. Kind of should have seen that coming, but we didn't. So I think it's trying to harmonize all those things in one platform so that you can have a consistent measurement across the entire viewing spectrum and then across the entire consumer journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Working down the row?
Yeah, we can just work down the road for this one.
All right. Well, I guess, so Innovid is an omni-channel video platform. Our primary business is we serve the majority of video ads domestically and increasingly globally. And so we have an interesting kind of perspective on what's happening across at least digital channels. And we see some of that transformation of the TV space because we've seen this enormous uptick in connected TV just in terms of pure delivery on our platform. And I think one of the things that we've heard mostly from marketers and that pain point is, does the notion of sort of syndicated, big scale measurement really work in the day and age of so many different platforms, so many different ways to buy this inventory, and even some of the sort of notions of planning media by using content as a proxy sort of need to be turned on their head a little bit. So, thank you. Whoever turned out that light. Okay, now you can see everyone. So yeah, I think fundamentally the needs haven't changed for the last 10 years. We've been talking about omni-channel and cross-platform measurement, but I think marketers specifically and their agency partners have gotten much more clear in saying, listen, we want a few metrics that are easy to digest. We've got lots of different systems where we need to see this data. No one sort of entity should try to solve the whole thing, but we need more consistency in how that data is treated across, so that it's not 17 different flavors. And I think that extends from basic measures of reach and frequency all the way down to some more sort of bespoke analytics that marketers are looking for.
Hi, I echo most of the thoughts I've heard. I think it's also the desire to get past just measuring GRPs and being able to get past age and gender into the types of data that we expect addressable to give us about audiences.
So I'll take a more kind of abrupt view. I think what's hurting the notion of evolution is this notion of perfection. So we have to get it 100% right to actually progress, which is what's held back this industry for a bit. There was simplicity and purity in when TV was TV. So you knew how to buy it, you knew how to measure it. Then it fragmented many years ago, right? Broadcast, cable fragmented broadcast, and then digital fragmented cable, and then CTV and apps fragmented everything else. So now that complexity of trying to get to a unifying principle of how to buy and measure and transact is going to be almost nearly impossible. And we shouldn't actually try to get to any level of consistency because we're never going to get there. Bob has been in business longer than I have. I've been doing this for 25 years, and Bob.
The old guy.
Well, we've been taking about single source for 25 years, at least as long as I've been talking about it, and we're not even closer to having a resolution. We're actually farther away from that. So I think the questions I get from CMOs is it's not a question of should I be buying, it's a question of how do I understand what to put in it relative to the value that I get out of it, right? That's not an easy type of question to answer unless you test your way into that, right? And if you sit around and say, well, I'm going to wait for some unified modeling solution it's going to somehow magically tell me that all these versions of television, which there's many versions of it, right? Just to get it to a singular understanding of what television is as complex as getting a single understanding of what digital is. It's gotten to that level, right? Let alone trying to unifying those principles together, right? To get to an understanding of cross-platform anything, right? So right now, cross-platform TV becomes an aspiration of ours, right? To get to this notion, right? Because every day that you look at it, somebody else is coming into the space saying that they've developed something that is completely different than what existed in the past, right? And somebody else comes in and saying, well, we're gonna measure this against something different. So now you have different partners providing different experiences, companies coming up to measure these things differently, right? And then you're allowing the industry to determine, well, what's right versus wrong. And that perfect right versus wrong shouldn't have to be one or the other. It should be, can I learn what works for me in that environment? And then can I get to an understanding with some level of clarity so I can make confident decisions and how do I distribute that money? So perfection is not going to happen. Progression, which we used to do in the past, right? Understand, test, understand incrementality of learnings, understand, keep learning over time, so we get to a point where, you know what, I'm good, but the difference from 25 years ago to today is the pace of that learning has been accelerated exponentially, right? So you have to find a way to be able to get confident risk taking in a faster scale.
So I think that was an excellent point. I would really agree with that. I think a lot of the demand for cross-platform measurement has really, especially around reach and frequency, just basic delivery metrics, has come from CMOs, as they've, like Mark Pritchard has been the main one, as they've seen their ability just to do even basic buys just fall apart. And out of that, we're starting to see the beginnings of finally some cooperation. Like with this there's an initiative with WFA ANA where finally the big walled gardens are starting to collaborate. But now once you start bringing this into TV, where it's not just fragmentation with display, which was initially Mark Pritchard's frustration, but fragmentation of TV buys, I think that that's just going to be viewed as intolerable by CMOs. The inability to even get basic delivery metrics to where they're just going to demand some type of cross-platform measurement for both delivery and effectiveness. And the good news is, even though there's been continued fragmentation, there also at the same time has been a lot of advances in stats and machine learning to model this stuff in complex ways. So
let's just play on that for a second. So historically, I mean, activity data from a consumer is increasingly passively collected at scale, right? POS data from a retailer, digital data from a website visitation, and set-top box data. So in the case of what Ampersand does, we're collecting viewing data from 38 million households. I mean, that's the atomic value is a household level viewing data. So the idea of being able to append that with an at occurrence data to understand at exposure and come up with deterministic reach and frequency curves, yes, only in one media type, it's happening. So the idea that I mean, you go back to the old adage, I know that half of my advertising works, I just don't know which half. It's just really sad, because we know now, like, we're seeing real reach and frequency. We're seeing, appending that to activity data, whether it's purchase data or website visitation. So I think we're making a lot of progress. I don't think we're as bad as we should be. That said, we've been flat for 6 years. Flat is kind of the new up for TV, while digital continues to grow double digits every year. We need to take back or at least neutralize those advantages they've had in measurement. And if the economy tanks, it's going to be TV that gets hurt the worst, because they want the measurement.
Yeah, I think completely hear you guys, and I think the main takeaway there being we should be consistently progressing and having consistency across platforms to the best that we can, but I think the test and learn approach is also something that's really valuable, something, it doesn't have to be perfect, but as long as it's something that we can all tolerate and feel comfortable with given the limitations cross-platform that we have for the time being, it helps kind of continue that progress. I think you guys teed up the next question pretty well then too. I think traditionally we've heard a lot about media, delivery metrics, reach, frequency, on target, et cetera, and we're hearing kind of more and more brand outcomes, brand performance come more into play. What are you guys kind of hearing about this? I know you spoke to this a bit, Ken, but how is that conversation evolving, and where are kind of the loyalties still lying, or are they starting to diverge?
you mean specifically around reach and frequency delivery?
Yeah, reach, frequency, and how other brand outcomes are more so coming to the forefront.
Right. So I think what we hear from our customers is this like bucketing of metrics into delivery metrics, and effectiveness metrics. And they each have their challenges, but there's this like frustration that all they're getting is delivery metrics. Like we're focused on reach, we're focused on viewability, we're focused on like Nielsen ratings, on DAR, but when it comes to actual effectiveness, especially effectiveness, across the media plan, that they're not getting the type of results that they want. So like that distinction we're hearing loud and clear. When it comes to delivering each of these across the media plan, I feel like the solution to that is sort of being provided by all of the focus on privacy, because you're starting to see this move away from transacting in terms of device IDs and towards transacting in terms of like household IDs, like Experian IDs, LiveRamp household IDLs, things like that. And this, I feel like, provides a path forward to be able to deliver delivery and effectiveness metrics, across the media plan.
Yeah, we can come back around this way this time.
I think the biggest questions, maybe asked different ways from CMOs, but they all kind of cluster around the same thing is, so there's 3 big buckets that they need to understand. So they want to understand the relative value that they get in the short term. What's the best way to understand that? And a way to be able to understand the value of marketing does, right? And part of the conversation is really fundamentally getting CMOs to understand what marketing's role has been. It's really never changed. Is to drive incrementality, right? CMOs, so they say, well, I want to just sell more to my current customers. In reality, that's not what marketing's job always was. It was always to drive net new gains. So marketing is a growth accelerant. Then the question is, what's the best way to do that? So we have exposure, right? So we're going to put a whole bunch of things in the market with the hope that they do something, right? And the hope something is a reaction. So what response do we see in the market that denotes that we actually did the right thing? And exposure can be defined in many different ways. Reach frequency is one of them. Pressure, right? Against an audience that we think is the right strategic audience. Response, right? Do we get them to do something? Do we get them to think? Right? Do we change their perception? If you think about hierarchy of effects, right? Unawareness, awareness, active awareness, consideration, preference, intent, all those things. Then do they take a behavior? Site traffic, store traffic, whatever the case may be. Do they transact? Those are the types of things that you have to go to CMOs to basically unpack all those things so they understand the relative value of what television does or it doesn't do, directly and indirectly, contributing to all other metrics that ultimately drive somebody down the funnel. That's just in the short term, right? That's giving you an ROI metric. And by the way, ROI is not an effectiveness metric, it's an efficiency metric, right? That's what got TV and it's in its problem. It's focusing on ROI delivery. Most, if not all, of television is not ROI. It's long-term, year, 2, 3, 4 years out. It's brand building mechanisms. Right? Then the question is, what's the best way to tell them the totality of what that impact delivers over continuum? Understanding that it's got to do 2 big things. It's got to seed demand against an audience that they define as strategic audience, which might change over time. And then it's got to harvest that demand or help harvest that demand. So when we go back, what I think we've done bad as an industry is basically say, well, TV does these things. And let's focus on the conversation of television versus saying, like, look what television does relative to the role of everything else. And if you're focusing on this singular metric of ROI in the short term, you've given up almost 80% of the long-term value that you're going to extrapolate from marketing. Right? And if you take just a natural evolution of what this looks like, I've seen multiples of 17x over 3 years, right? So you do a 2.1 ROI versus a 17.1 net long-term growth of profit value. When you think about volumetric businesses, any volumetric businesses, right? You go to a CEO, a CFO, and you show them those numbers, they're not going to care that you're asking for $100 million or $500 million in television if you can prove to them that it does both delivery short-term, delivery long-term. But in order to do that, you got to unpack it in a way that shows, hey, by the way, when you do this, these things actually work. If you take this out, all those effectiveness, short-term response mechanisms that you think do the heavy lifting, right? This is what happens to them over time. So you have to be able to unpack. Education and knowledge has also been the fundamental biggest inhibitor of actually getting people to do this, right? We go in and saying you have to do this and only this. Let me talk to you about only this, right? And the industry is great at that. Companies come around, they focus on the singular one thing. And when you have to go back and re-educate, re-engineer CMOs to go have a conversation with CFOs, you have to re-engineer them to go back to remember what marketing's role and job was, right? And not to say, I'm going to choose television because television does this. I'm going to choose the mechanisms that allows me to drive the long-term profit, right? Television will naturally come into that play because brand is the thing that drives long-term profit. The way to build a brand, it's not exclusively on television, but generally, right, you need a mode of action. Television being a very mass reach medium, it generates an emotional response. It will naturally come into that conversation.
Preach.
Is that a drop the mic moment, I think?
I think that might have just been a drop the mic moment. I mean, definitely want to hear from you guys too. But
I'm glad I didn't wear a skirt tonight. So echoing what George said.
I'm glad I didn't wear a skirt too.
So are we. We look at measurement on a brand by brand basis, and obviously if a brand has zero awareness, nobody's going to buy their products because you have to know something exists before you can buy it. But what we see increasingly is the CMO knows that they need to build that awareness, but the CFO is going, where's my revenue and what am I getting for your ad spend? So we try as much as possible to sort of build a bundled measurement approach where we look at with TV with the traditional reach and delivery types of metrics, but also couple that with some level of brand lift study, maybe taking advantage of, LiveRamp and Data Plus Math have some really interesting offerings out there where they combine their data with geolocation partners, and then also tie to, I've been exposed to the ad, and I've gone to your store, or I've gone to your website, and look at those things together so that hopefully we can satisfy both needs, the need for the CMO to see what they want to see from their investment, and then the CFO getting a little something on the side so he keeps funneling some money to the CMO to spend.
There is so much wisdom and stuff I believe in too that I'm not going to try to say the same thing, but maybe I'll offer this insight. So we are pretty passionate about investing behind connected TV specifically, and we've done some research. I think we're believers that it's not one metric to rule them all. It really is kind of this layered cake, and it's, if I could say it another way, it's, oftentimes we're trying to inform, like, if a media planner or if a buyer is trying to figure out what job am I hiring connected TV to do specifically. I'm buying out of home and TV and whatever, but I've got this connected TV thing, which is a little bit like addressable and it's a little bit like linear, but hey, I have to, the consumer is doing all these things to access that content. So why would any marketer choose that experience? What we're trying to help inform and provide more intelligence around is, okay, if you need to know how much reach that inventory is giving you, incremental to your linear spend, incremental to all the places where you can buy CTV inventory, we think that there's an opportunity to just provide a whole lot more eyesight and clarity to the market about what that opportunity even looks like. Because I think someone earlier said it, even within TV cross-platform, and the definition of TV has gotten a little muddled. So that's the first part. And those are basic delivery metrics, right? How many households did you reach? When did you reach them? Is that the same household that you reached over here? Everyone needs to know the fundamentals to do any kind of schedule where that duplication occurs. Then, interestingly, with connected TV, it's a big TV appliance. It's that sight, sound, and motion. But now you can pile all sorts of data on it, and oh, by the way, you can create interactive functionality within it. Well, then you have to think about why would I, invest in that kind of inventory? What is it? What kind of experience am I trying to create for the consumer? So we've invested heavily in trying to understand, what do those experiences do over time? Do they make you think differently about the brand? Are they more performance executions? because we think that there's an opportunity for continuous learning and to build this empirical knowledge that says, if you're trying to drive more of an immediate response, sure, you should use CTV potentially and the interactive capabilities within it to sequence with other parts of your campaign and use the execution within that to really reach that specific consumer or get them to download the app, go to the store, so on and so forth. I really think that there's an opportunity within connected TV specifically, because it's not mobile, it's not display, it's a lot like TV, but the temptation, I think, from the marketing side is to do too many things and then to end up being confused about what is this doing and how does it help amplify the rest of what I'm activating in my marketing efforts. So I guess just to kind of underscoring some of the other points, but specifically where we see the need to grow up connected TV's knowledge base over the next year or two, so that we can help people buy and use that platform and that medium with more confidence.
I think I would add to that. I think if TV didn't work, digital native brands that are D2C wouldn't be buying advertising on TV. So, I think it's a testament to the strength of TV, sound, sight, and motion. I also think if I'm a CMO, there's probably three things I want. I want to know, did I get what I paid for? Did I get the impressions that I actually threw money down for? And then who did I reach? And then what were the business outcomes? And if I think about the first one, increasingly the industry's moving from probabilistic to deterministic because of the set-top box data that are out there. So I think the precision's getting better, and I think we're going to probably move to an environment where it's a process audit and not some sort of Nielsen-like sample, one. And then two, on the second one, reach and frequency. Again, I think we're getting more precision there. I think the last one, which is outcomes, it's an entire funnel. So there's no one size that fits all in that bucket. You can have, top of the funnel, awareness, persuasion, message association. It's part of my evoke set, et cetera, all the way down to transaction. And I think you got to be able to put, the measurement tap in the data stream at the right angle so that you get the right information that you need. And I think, again, we're making progress as an industry. It's not perfect. I don't think we're asking for that, but I think the CMOs are expecting, again, the digital-like data measurement and targeting, but we're going to get there over time.
Definitely echo what George and others have said. It's been I think historically a pain point or a weakness for connected TV that we didn't always have the same parity with measurement. And paraphrase one of my favorite movies, I think we got to a point where we got so concerned with whether we could do it, we didn't stop to think whether we should. Anybody? Jurassic Park? It's not to say that we shouldn't be measuring things like foot traffic and sales lift, but to the points made over here, I think setting expectations with clients about the role CTV plays relative to mobile, and just because this is a shiny new object doesn't necessarily mean it's the first hoop we should jump through when we maybe haven't fulfilled our upper funnel goals. And we also deal with the challenge of we can measure it, so we're going to, and don't worry, we're not basing success off of this until the end of the campaign when it turns out your ROAS was not where we wanted it to be, so we're making some tough decisions. So I think that education piece is incredibly important. There are things connected TV does really well in isolation as well as in conjunction with these other screens. And I think the real benefits are when we can synergistically play them all together to help contribute to the different levels of the funnel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guys all hit the nail on the head in terms of what I was thinking as well, and what we see at Roku. I think looking both at long-term and really defining what the role of each piece plays, especially connected TV, where there is a little bit less known, a little bit still of that Wild West mentality. So I think, just because of one thing or not correctly defining it really can set you back, and it's important to keep the bigger picture in mind also. You touched on this for a second quickly, Bob, but I think something that we're all seeing also is this surge of direct-to-consumer brands, those D2C brands, and they really bring a digital mindset into a TV landscape once they kind of make that jump into TV, whether that be linear, CTV, VOD, advanced TV. I can't think of any more acronyms, but you guys probably all can.
BFD.
BFD, yes, exactly. It's all BFD. So what do you think the implications are for this, looking at the landscape more broadly, and especially as a lot of these brands are making the jump and maturing a bit into, beyond social and into TV more so? I guess we can go down this way this time, or if we want to start in the middle, if that's not confusing.
I have a few thoughts about it.
Let's hear it.
Probably not as many productive thoughts as some of these guys. I find it very personally exciting, particularly living in New York, where we've seen the birth and development of a lot of these guys on like subway ads and out-of-home ads, and banging on their doors for a while trying to talk about the benefits of video, so many of them being so laser focused on display and searched out of the gate. It is really gratifying in some way to see the heavy lean now into video, some of them going into TV as well in a big way. I see nothing but upside from it, but I do think that the learnings and the laser focus that a lot of them have on performance metrics, while it does pose a significant challenge in the video space because of some of the things we talked about before, setting proper expectations, I'm curious to see how that potentially transforms traditional brand advertisers' approach to balancing the need for branding versus some of those lower funnel outcomes. I think George, you spoke to that pretty nicely before, but I think it's only going to get more challenging as these guys are maybe losing some of that market share to these up-and-comers.
I think there's never been a better time to be in TV than right now, or in video, or TV broadly defined. I don't know what the right definition is, but I mean, again, it's transforming in front of us in real time, and that's exciting. And I think this, this path towards, IP delivered TV is going to give us the metrics that we've been wanting since digital's birth in 1995. So I think we're in a great spot. I think it's going to be, we need to take advantage of the lessons that digital can show us, one, and I think we also need to be very, very careful of the privacy, third rail. I think those are the two things that we should make sure that we have a touchstone around.
Yeah, but feel free to go out of order too.
So
That's
we-
yeah. Yes, exactly.
We so you look at the VAB numbers that were released maybe about 6 months ago. It's a hockey stick, right? So direct-to-consumer brands are projected to spend somewhere about $10 billion by the end of this year. It's $10 billion, up from 5 almost 2 years ago. That's crazy, right? 200 brands. It's not the spend that concerns me. It's a question of what are they trying to do with that spend. So if you look at what type of organization they have, so they know this thing called television does something. Right? I spend money and something happens. Somebody goes to my site. I see more people come to my site, right? And then they get back into the digital trap, right? Oh, I'm going to do on an ROI, last touch, right? I'm going to spend money. I expect this outcome. I expect it today. If I don't do it, I'm going to pull the spot down, right? Then you look at the ones that are truly mature marketers, right? It's going to be representative in the type of CMO that they have in that boardroom. Because in order for them to spend money on television, fundamentally they have to understand the aspect of what marketing is meant to do on a time frame, right? So yes, they're beholden because they're startups. They're beholden to making sure that they drive revenue. Well, then you look at Casper and you look at those fundamentals. It doesn't really work. But be it as it may, let's assume that they're trying to grow a profitable business over time. Their ability to do that has to be predicated on this understanding of, TV serves a purpose. If what they're doing is direct response television, right? Yes, then you should treat it that way. But what they're putting on television is not direct response ads, right? At least, in their minds, this is where the CMO, right? Depending on the CMO you bring in, will have a distinction. They think they have a call to action, go to my site, do this, and they want to call that branding, but what it really is direct response, and then they wonder why the brand doesn't take shine, right? And then why the moment that they cut off television, right? They go from a million traffic to 5,000. How come there's no sustained traffic? Because you're not building a brand. So I think it's the notion of what that spend is ultimately trying to do. I think some of them, right? They realize that they're going to spend, for example, like Purple, spent $140 million in 2019 on television. If you look at the majority of that, right? The first half of that was probably direct response television. Somebody at some point came in and saying, you guys are doing this wrong. Let's focus on branding, right? And then over time, it's actually going to do much more. And then when you look at their business, you look at their growth rate, right? They're actually doing much better once they start focusing on that. So yes, they'll spend money. The question is, are they going to judge it back to what they believe, which is the digital performance metrics, or is a mature marketer going to come in and say, let's treat this like a true brand building exercise and use television for the notion of building a brand, which will pay off over time.
I would completely agree with that. I think some CMOs have taken the right lesson, the right takeaway from the D2C revolution, and some have taken the wrong takeaway. The wrong takeaway is that brand doesn't matter anymore. But in fact, really, what should we be learning from the DTC revolution? What are the historical barriers to entry for major brands? It's your ability it's scale, your ability to negotiate like shelf space with major retailers. It's your ability to just pay for production and your ability to pay for a lot of advertising. Well, now with DTC, all of these have gone away. You can pay to have a product produced overseas very inexpensively. You can buy ads, performance ads on Google and on Facebook. And so these advantages have all gone away. What is left? Well, all that's left is really your brand at that point. And so when you see that Casper is losing $200 a mattress, and that's through acquisition costs, customer acquisition costs, well, what is the one thing that you can do generally to lower your CPA curve? It's not tweaking your keywords. It's paying for brand advertising. That's the best thing that the best tactic, the best DR tactic to lower your CPA curve. The problem is that no measurement company really is able to connect these two things, to connect upper funnel brand lift. What is 1 point in lift in consideration? What impact does that have on your CPA curve? So there obviously is a connection there, and that's what our job is as measurement companies and agencies, is to try to navigate through this and find the right optimal mix. But that's what to me is exciting about direct-to-consumer brands moving into connected TV. Is not that they will. I'm not concerned that they are going to ruin TV by turning it into all performant media. Because they're all losing their shirts over acquisition costs. The only thing that they could be doing is trying to invest in brand precisely to lower their acquisition costs. That's the real opportunity by DTC moving into connected TV.
I think, and I totally agree. One of the struggles I see, at least with our clients, is getting them to commit the extra dollars to measure things that they need to measure across the board, whether it's doing a brand lift study or, God forbid, a media mix model. And like one of the pain points that's very common is the length of time it takes to do a media mix model. You're going to wait months till you have anything to action on, and by then you're already 2 quarters into your planning ahead of time, and so you're reacting backwards to things. There's that whole time crunch, and I think the digital world has made us very used to getting real-time or close to real-time metrics, and TV is just kind of like lagging behind. And if there's ways we can leverage to speed that up, and it's never going to be like a perfect one-to-one, there's going to be like modeling and things coming out of that, but trying to encourage clients to measure the full spectrum, and that it is worth a certain investment to do that because it will save you money in the long run is a challenge.
I'm going to jump in here. I mean, my company, or the analysts that work in our organization, have access to a persistent ID for household. 36 million, 37 million. We have daily data coming in every day for viewing. We have ad exposure data coming from national ad occurrence information. We have local stuff that we inserted. We have another technology that's identifying the local O&Os. All that can be commingled and create products that understand exposure. We can take that ad exposure file and marry it to website visitation. We can marry it to POS data. We can marry it to, location data. That's being done. So the idea of going back to a year-long study to do marketing mix seems so fundamentally wrong in this day and age when we, again, activity data is passively collected at scale and available in the marketplace today. We, as an industry, should embrace that. This is our time to do that.
I like that idea of actually having those D2C brands kind of maybe push linear forward a little bit, get them more to a real-time and digital, but also kind of like you talked about, George, keeping those more traditional longer tail studies to look at the long-term value, also kind of marry both of those worlds. But before we jump in, do you want to add anything, Jessica?
No, I mean, I was sort of thinking about, how data or with emotion to just try and learn and keep at it. But it occurred to me in the conversation that when I joined Nielsen, I don't know, 12 or something years ago, I came in through a startup called Buzzmetrics, and our job at the time was to help brands understand what was actually happening to their brands in a digital environment that they could no longer control. And I guess I sort of feel a little sympathetic to the fact that consumers have also shown them that notion of brand loyalty can literally, you can invest hundreds of millions of dollars, and one sort of crazy Twitter firestorm can literally change the value of that overnight. So I guess I was feeling sort of, despite wanting marketers to continue to invest in the tools that we have today, I can sort of understand why we have, with all the data that's available and this sense that that delicate thing that you can hardly, of what is the value of a brand, it has changed from a marketer's perspective too. And I think we can't, as practitioners that are serving those set of needs, probably can't lose sight of that reality as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that actually tees up the next conversation topic well. I mean, I know D2C brands aren't the only ones that are focused on performance and kind of straddling that line between where do we focus between performance and branding. I guess, are you guys seeing that also from different marketers, that you either go the performance track or the branding track, or is that starting to fade and the line's starting to blur a little more?
That's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to an advertiser actually today, and I was trying to get them to think about why they should care about planning CTV as part of their overall TV planning, and they said, well, we only use connected TV for performance. That's it, bottom of the funnel. They said, but other brands in our portfolio see it at the top of the funnel, and so I think that it's very sort of by brand and by category specifically. I think the other side of that coin is many agencies also, I think, are still sort of structured in such a way where you've got teams that specialize in buying that, and so to some degree I think there's less of the tool set and less of what has to be true in terms of the data, but culturally, what it looks like inside of those teams where, you're not only aligning the media and how people are buying, but what's this campaign designed to do? How does that carry through a quarter, a year, what have you? So I think that's more of just a cultural thing, and org structures kind of come in vogue every 5 or 6 years and change back again. Who knows what it'll be like in the next few years.
Yeah, I was just going to say, going back to earlier comments, I'm a big fan of measuring as many different outcomes as you can. I genuinely believe the more information you have, the more informed your decisions can be. Unfortunately, one of the challenges that we have, and I don't think we're alone in this, is anytime we're measuring multiple outcomes, we know there's probably going to be some dissonance between them. It's an easy story when everything's up and to the left, up and to the right. But when we have upper funnel metrics showing one result, middle funnel showing something similar, and then down funnel not necessarily showing a result, I see great nuance in that story, right? Where are we losing the thread? Where can we be building out the strategy? So often I think there's this knee-jerk reaction by clients to go to the lowest common denominator or the point furthest down in the funnel and say, ultimately that's all we're looking at, even though we thought we cared about all these other metrics. And that's what we're judging success on, and it looks like you failed. Sorry, we learned nothing from this other than that it didn't work. So there's a real challenge for us to set expectations correctly and make sure, if we're bringing in multiple ways to measure something, that there are teams that are there who are ready and willing to hear that story and dig in to understand what the successes and failures were, what the great success or the great learning was, so that it's not either a complete success or a complete failure at the end of the day.
I think the biggest opportunity and yet the biggest obstacle for, I would say, marketers, chief marketing officers, to agencies or anybody that partners with them, is trying to get the CMOs to realize that they need to go and have a conversation with CEOs and build a belief at that C level that marketing is supposed to do something different than what they probably think it's supposed to be doing. Right? CFO has a perspective of really clear, hardcore numbers because that's all they know. CEO doesn't know anything because they fundamentally believe what somebody's telling them, right? So if somebody goes in and says, look at the data I have, this is what's going to happen, cut all the other money and put it over here. The other thing, selfishly for us, I think, but also more from an executive level perspective of a brand, is if CMO, if we believe the tenure of a CMO is 2.5 years, let's say it takes a year to build a belief with a CMO, it takes another 6 months to activate it, 6 months later they're gone. So you got to do that whole cycle all over again, right? There's not much consistency what you can do there, right? You don't really build momentum, and that's what a brand does. It should build momentum over time, makes marketing's job a lot easier, a la a base, right? Marketing's biggest opportunity is not actually to spend money to drive sales. It's you build a brand, it should help to do that for you. Like that's why most MMMs will always show the base of the business is driving sales. Right? Marketing's incrementality is not that much. It shouldn't be that much. The only time marketing incrementality drives a lot is when you've eroded the base. You erode the base by eroding the brand. Right? So you have to spend double amount of money to make up what you normally would have had anyway. So my biggest opportunity and challenge is to actually get in front of the CEOs and presidents of businesses to get them to convince and believe that these guys are actually going to be around 10, 15, 20 years. So no matter which CMO comes through the door, they're going to come in and saying, yeah, no, this is the way we do it. Right? And I want you to do it this way because we started on this journey 4 years ago, and we're seeing the business pay off. Because let me tell you something, it takes 3 years, if not 4 years, to build a business back up to where it's been eroded. So if you erode the brand for 3 years, right? Every year you erode the brand, it takes about 2 to 3 years to build it back up again. Think about that in this day and age, right? And that's the expectation of a CMO coming in is I got 12 months to show movement. I just told you it takes 3 years to build a business. Those mathematics don't work. It's never going to work. Right? So they're going to run for the hills every single time. They're going to be forced and pressured to deliver on short term. And that's fundamentally what drives this reciprocal behavior that's ultimately going to get the brand to go lower and lower. The education bit in front of the belief in front of the president and CEO. And then, yes, you have to arm them with the solutions to think like a CFO. So it's not one. It's not an MMM. It's not TV attribution. It's not digital attribution. It's not brand equity modeling. It's not long-term modeling. It's actually all 5 of those things coming together. Because each one of those things serves a purpose. Each one of those things are going to triangulate a vantage point that goes and allows you to go have a conversation with a CFO and saying, you give me $1, I will give you back 10. I'll give you 2 this year. I'll give you 8 next year. CFO is like, that's great. I make my money, right? Doesn't really matter, right? And then you go back to reframing the conversation of marketing. All marketing is meant to drive performance. Not today, right? It's meant to drive performance over time. Brand is the biggest driver of performance. The more you build a brand, the more the brand allows you to grow, the more you can actually make use of that brand in the short term. And that's what you're starting to see, this notion of coming back to that, right? So you see a lot of studies in the last 4 or 5 years, right? A lot of brands that have kind of drank the performance Kool-Aid, at least the definition of short-term performance Kool-Aid, pulled money away from the brand, pull it away, because they fundamentally chased the belief that if I drive digital in all those channels, I'm going to actually grow the business. Yes, in the short term, it gives you a false sense of confidence. What you're doing, and by the time most of these guys realize what's happening, it's too late. Right? And the CMO 2 years later wakes up and says, I'm gone anyway, I don't care, let somebody else be that problem. Right? But the CFO and the CEO that's left there, they're like, what the hell just happened? I was great 3 years ago, look what's happening now. I can't make rhyme or reason, so what do? They go cost-cutting measures. Cut, because they have to show profit on the bottom line, right? They don't realize what they're doing is getting themselves more and more into a hole. Now you got another CMO comes in, looks at the lay of the land, and says, this is going to be almost impossible, right? So what do? They try to deliver on the short term, right? So it's this reciprocal effect, I think, and where I've seen the most opportunities, honestly, convincing the CMO that their best interest to actually allow us to help them convince the CEO, the CFO, and whoever else makes those types of long-term decisions that will actually be around, assuming this pattern of CMOs have a life shelf of 2 to 3 years. Let's hope it goes back to a place where it's been 8 to 9 to 10 years. And if you overlay the tenure of a CMO, the last 10 years, and you overlay this notion of how the brand has dissipated over time, they're positively correlated. Shorter tenures as CMO has shown that most of the brands have eroded their brand over time.
We have a very similar conversation with a lot of brands at Survata when we're asked the question, I ran this brand campaign, and you were telling me in this brand lift study that I drove these lifts in awareness, consideration, and favorability, but my brand tracker is flat. I bet it's something everyone on this stage has been asked that by a brand. How is it that my brand tracker is flat? And you have to keep going back to these fundamentals that you're talking about. Well, the brand campaign didn't reach everybody. And when you don't invest in brand, it declines. It doesn't stay static. All these attitudes, they decline over time. And so it declined amongst the people that you didn't reach. It went up amongst the people that you did reach. And so that's why your brand tracker was flat. And that makes it very vivid how if you don't invest in your brand, there's nothing worse than you can do from a performance marketing perspective than to not invest in your brand.
No, to what George said, there seem to be very few people around anymore for the long game. And as the CMO goes, so goes the agency. So for an agency to have a client over 3 years is kind of become a rare thing. And you need some kind of consistency to keep building, because nothing really happens the first year, right? You get little inklings of things, and then having the same team would allow you to go deeper if the same team existed, but they don't for very long. And another note in terms of like measurement, what we present to a CMO based on what the CMO's goals might be a different spin than we would present to a CFO to try to get their buy-in. So I think it's possible to dig into the data that you have, even if it's going down to the creative level, which is very important sometimes because certain creatives will reach some goals and certain creatives will reach other goals, and you really need to drill in to see what's moving where. But it's worth looking for different stories within the data you have.
Believe it or not, that's actually all the time we have right now. We'll open up to questions, but thank you guys so much. This was definitely enlightening and I think helpful to hear.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming. Do you want to do questions? I thought. Do you guys want to do questions? Do you guys have questions? Okay, great. Yeah.
Sure.
So in the context of this debate, long-term versus short-term effect, which is quite strategic for our industry. Some platforms are better when it comes to delivering short-term effects. Some platforms are better when it comes to longer-term effects. Where would you position connected TV in terms of delivering short-term or long-term effects in comparison to other platforms like linear TV or other digital and mobile platforms? And then, based on your answer, how would you consider the targeting and the creative strategy in connection to that?
Just real quick, I think short term, I think it's been said a lot down on that side, and I agree. We still continue to push connected TV or advanced TV primarily as that branding vehicle. I think there's ways that we can start to get a little more sophisticated. When you talk about audience, we're not necessarily beholden to the same age and gender that a brand might be buying on linear TV. So I think the opportunity is to say, we're still thinking top of funnel, even short-term outcomes, but we're maybe looking at a much narrower, more behaviorally focused audience. That's, I think, one of the great benefits. Similar message to TV, but a more personalized approach in terms of who we're reaching and maybe even how that messaging is being delivered from a DCO or dynamic creative optimization perspective, where maybe the message that Amy gets is a different message than the one that Ken gets and the one that George gets.
So if you do connected television, I think every channel, it's really dependent upon what you put in that environment, right? So if I put a direct response ad in a television linear, it's got a shelf life. I mean, it's direct response because I expect a response from it, right? So if I got a sale going on over the weekend, in 24 hours, I expect in 48 hours I should see something. Otherwise, it's not a long-term mechanism. Right? Similar to social, similar to display. I can tell you that I've seen many powerful campaigns that have built a brand on display and social. Right? So the assumption that social, search, display, right, that those things are performance-driven, it's the context of what you're trying to do in those environments. So I can treat any one of those environments as either performance, short-term performance, I want something to happen within a week or a day or whatever the case may be, or I can use them as brand-building mechanisms, right? Google can be used as a brand-building mechanism. Connected environments can be used as a brand-building mechanism. Generally, video, because of what it's entailed to do, which is drive emotion connection, right, which is ultimately what the brand needs to do, generally serves a purpose of brand building, which plays more in the long term. But direct response television has been around forever and a day, right? Since even before cable television came, right? I mean, there's many spots that we know over time. So I think it's really the context of what you're trying to do with it, right? They play different roles for different reasons.
We have another question.
How you doing, Victor Hugo Gutierrez? First and foremost, thank you for what you do. And I personally want to just give a round of applause because everybody has an experience, but you created an experience by dropping the knowledge, as the host said, and it took the work of everybody to make it happen, from the staff to everything else. So a round of applause to everyone. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you to everyone that made this experience possible. Now, the one question that I do have for you is that all these people are looking for one nugget, one thing that can turn their life around. What thought do you want to leave them with when they walk out of this room and say, you know what? I was at that conference, I was at this event, I was there, but this changed my life. So later in the future, it's like, you know, you changed my life. So what would you want to leave these people, each one individually, for you and yourself?
I'd say this feels like a George question, honestly.
I was going to say, wash your hands.
Well, I'll say, you know, it sounds very simple, but take a risk and don't do what you did last year. I think we're all in the midst of the big TV upfront, and there's a lot of reasons to stay at home and just sort of plug and play, do what I did last year. I think everyone has created a case for why there's no need to do that and be complacent. So I would just say get out, try to make change, try to learn, and then share whatever you've learned with your network and community and clients. Because again, like the systems, the data, the tools are not the things that are holding us back.
I would say triangulation of truth, right? Don't try to take one perspective. Look at it from many different perspectives, right? So knowledge is gained by trying to understand what the other person is trying to understand. So if you put yourself in their perspective, you're going to get an insight that allows you to potentially remove the preconceived notion or bias that you had, right? The saying it's only this and it can only be this, right? That was the biggest thing that I learned, which is, let me understand the 5 or 7 or 10 people in the room. They all are they're all trying to get to the same goal, even if they don't know that, right? They're trying to get it at different ways. So if I understand the perspectives of each one of those people, I can take that collective knowledge, triangulate something, and I've done 2 things. 1, I've understood everybody. 2, I can understand how to connect a connective tissue across them, and hopefully, right, instead of trying to convince one person, I've convinced all 7 or 8, and at the same time, I've given them some education and knowledge. So try to triangulate and give yourselves perspectives outside of what you're going in with.
It's been said before, but just to reiterate from my side, connected TV, really great at wearing a number of different hats, keeping in mind what it can do relative to the context of course, traditional linear TV, but what we would maybe consider more down funnel screens like mobile and desktop as well. That's when you're truly going to unlock its power, when you're making sure you're measuring it, targeting it, and expecting outcomes based on what it can do to ladder up to a holistic approach across all of those environments.
I guess I would say the limits of what we can do keep changing. So whatever was true 6 months ago is not true today, and the landscape will have changed again 6 months hence. So keep on your toes and keep reading.
Other questions? I'll ask one final one. Two of you mentioned the CFO a few times, a role we talk about a lot less than the CMO and the CEO as marketers in the broader analytics ecosystem. Does the agency have a duty or even the rights to convince the CFO to be long-term focused, or is your job to convince the CMO to be long-term focused while he or she is around for 2.4 years and hope that message trickles down to the CFO? How much interaction should we be having with the CFO?
I think it's our job to give the CMO ammunition to go in and convince the CFO that what they're doing is the right thing.
I think it's, if I take my agency perspective, it's in our best interest, right, to be in front of the CFO and the presidents of businesses and the CEOs, with the understanding that the CMO, for that respective business, might not be around long enough, right, for us to help, right? But if we've built a belief on the executive level, more times than not, no matter which CMO comes in, right, we might have a higher opportunity and shot to actually deliver on the promise that we did. So we might be in there for 5 or 6 or 7 years. I think if I put my consultant hat on, I would say it's our duty to empower the CMO to be intelligent, right? To remind the CMO of what marketing's role is, and will always be, which is to drive growth, right? So the CMO is a growth person. Should always be about growth, net incrementality of growth. Brand, business, whatever the case may be, you're trying to grow. At various levels, but you're trying to grow. Ideally, if we do those two things, no matter where that CMO lands, they'll remember that we helped. They'll remember that we empowered them. We'll remember that we enabled them, right? And hopefully that makes it a lot easier for an agency when the opportunity arises for us to go have a conversation. And if we're so lucky and fortunate to work with that CMO again, it'd be a lot easier for us to have that CMO, right, open the door for us to go into CFO, right? Because we've done that job already. So I think if we do that more than enough times, it should be a kind of a cost of doing business of sorts, right? Because the CMO will only work better if they can convince those guys. We will only work better if we empower the CMO to convince those guys.
Okay, one final round of applause for our panelists.